order. This is the full committee of Ways and Means. We have 12 bills on the calendar. We call House Bill 196, Matt Dollar. We will not call Matt Dollar because he's not here. All right, Representative Carson, House Bill 217. We're operating off of LC 345145S. And as I understand it, it's a substitute because we amended it in committee and we've got the substitute here. And so if you'll tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you want me to go down there, or do you want me right here is good?
Right where you are.
Sure. Working on, as you mentioned, LC 345145S. This is working toward an expansion of the Student Scholarship Organization under the Qualified Education Expense Credit. This increases the program, what's currently $58 million to $65 million with a 10% escalator per year as long as the program is fully subscribed each year with a total eventual cap of $100 million in outer years. We've also added some few other specifics there. Currently, the program is $58 million, and the subscriptions will sell out by more than twice over the first day because of its popularity. However, people may not fund it. In other words, write a check, strike their credit card or what have you. And some of these credits, even though approved in statute for $58 million, only about 52 or 53 or what have you are actually funded. So what we're doing in lines 26, 27, and 28 are rolling over those credits from one year to the next based on some early reporting from earlier than what is now reporting from the SSOs and rolling that over. Section in lines 31 through 34, we have a set aside for the C corporations, and lines 35, we have, just to make sure that everyone gets a bite at the apple, if you will, we have a provision where the credits are going to be available for at least the first 10 business days, or for 10 business days each calendar year. We also have some disclosures in lines 70, 71, and 72 in regard to exactly how much in fees the SSOs are retaining. And there's also some more disclosure on line 93, a new item. This is the average scholarship dollar amount by quartile. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions.
Are there questions? Representative Peake.
Representative Carson, so that carryover provision, that you dealt with that, what we talked about in subcommittee, and that's what's in lines 26 to 28. So by X amount of time during a year, you find out you got an amount of unused credits, that gets applied toward what's available for next year.
Correct, except for that does not factor into the 10% escalator.
Right, okay, right. But whatever the gross amount is, that's what's going to get thrown into the pot for the next year.
Whatever unfunded credits there are in one year will be thrown into the following year. Yes.
That's good work. Look forward to support. Good bill here.
And
thanks.
I do feel strongly about this. I've heard from literally dozens, if not hundreds, of parents and children all across the state who just want school choice and better options for their kids. I would like to point out one thing. People talk about the cost of this program. The average scholarship, and there is transparency, even though people say that it's lacking. The average scholarship in 2015 was $3,150, and that's about the same as it was for 2014 and 2013. The average QBE funding that we are responsible constitutionally, at least under the Constitution, for a quality basic education, the average QBE funding per student is around $4,700 to $4,800 per student. This is a way of giving children a better opportunity, their parents' choice, and at a lower cost to the state.
Are there other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Second.
There's a motion second to pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. It passes to rules. And I'm going to ask Chairman Stevens, if he will, to chair the meeting so that I can present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to move to present H.R. 51, the forest land fair market value.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a constitutional amendment to amend the Constitution that deals with the Forest Land Protection Act. Essentially what it does is remove the 2008 base year, which is presenting a problem as we get further and further away from that base year. And then it allows the legislature to determine the valuation methodology, which is what the enabling legislation does. But essentially what the constitutional amendment does is removes the 2008 base year.
Questions of the committee? What's the committee's pleasure? Got to pass. A second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed. Bill moves on to rules. Next is going to be, let's see, 85. House Bill 85, the ad valorem methodology to establish forest land fair market value.
All right, this is the bill that actually establishes the methodology to be used. And what it does is, in order to deal with the amount of money that the state sends back to the counties that are adversely impacted, there has to be a mechanism for, since we would remove the 2008 base value, there has to be a methodology for determining fair market value for these properties. But you do not want to, even though there's a reduction in the fair market value for the Forest Land Protection Act, you don't want to treat that forest land any different than the forest land that is out there that is not under the Forest Land Protection Act or covenant. And so the methodology that we have put into this bill basically provides that the Department of Revenue will establish a regional approach to have the property assessed for valuation purposes, so that there will be uniformity throughout the state, throughout the counties, but also in valuing both the property that is subject to the covenant and the property that is not placed in the covenant, as long as it's forest land. And so that's essentially what we're doing here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the committee? Yes, ma'am. What number are you? 18, there we go.
So if your land is currently in a CUVA, then when it
This is FLIPA. This is
or
FLIPA.
I meant that, I'm sorry. So if it's currently in that program, and then when it renews, it would go to the new rules? Or would the new rules apply immediately?
No, it's beginning when the bill takes effect, the assessment or the evaluation procedure would take place then.
Okay.
Other questions? What is the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of moving the bill to, will say aye. All those opposed. The bill moves on to rules. We're going to move on to the substitute, House Bill 225, if that should be next, Mr. Chairman, which is the rideshare network leasing and sales exemption repeal.
All right, this is a substitute to the bill that was actually passed out of subcommittee. The purpose of the substitute is, number one, to make it clear that rideshare networks are covered under our sales tax law. There's apparently some disagreement as to whether current law will allow the rideshare network, such as Uber and Lyft and any others that may be established in the state, to be subject to sales tax, because of the fact that there is a question as to whether the driver is providing the service or whether it is the facilitator that is providing the service. This makes it clear that if you process payments and you facilitate, or if you are affiliated with the processor of payments, that you are a dealer under the statute and subject to the sales tax. And the only change between what passed the subcommittee and what is presented to you today is that the Department of Revenue brought to my attention that sometimes the facilitator may be the processor of payment, or that they may work through an affiliate. And so we've just made it clear that if it's an affiliate or the facilitator, that it's still covered as a dealer.
Questions of committee? We have a motion to pass. Is there a second? We have a second. All those in favor of passing substitute to House Bill 225 on the rules say aye. Aye. All those opposed. The bill passes. The last bill we have, Mr. Chairman, is House Bill 329, where we've got the income tax rate imposed on taxable net income.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does is rewrites the income tax law in the state of Georgia in basically 4 ways. The first part of the bill takes away with the graduated brackets that we currently have, which go from 1% through 6%, but it reaches 6% rather quickly. And most of the people in the state of Georgia, or all of the people, are subject to the top rate anyway. And so what we're doing is we're collapsing the brackets into one rate, and because that rate will result in an increased revenue, we're cutting the rate to 5.4%. So instead of having a rate of 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, and 6%, we'll have one rate of 5.4%. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is eliminate the income tax deduction for Georgia income taxes. We are one of 4 states that actually allow somebody to deduct Georgia income taxes on both the federal and the state return. And so this brings us in line with most of the other states that have income taxes. The third thing that this does is provide a work credit for low-income families so that they actually will get up to the amount of the tax that they're liable for, that they could receive all of that back as a refund or as a reduction in their taxes. Unlike the federal earned income credit, it is not a refundable credit. In other words, you cannot get more than what you paid in, but you can only max out to what you've actually paid in income taxes. But this will be a benefit to the working families in this state. And then the fourth thing that it does is it provides a index of our personal exemption, dependency exemptions, and the what is it, Lynn? Standard deduction. And so what we're doing is we are basically indexing these so that as inflation increases, we do not get pushed into paying more taxes just because of inflation. And so the personal exemption and the standard deduction and the dependency exemptions would be indexed. I have actually talked to the department and will work on the Senate side if this bill proceeds to perhaps make that, instead of an annual index, make it either a 3 or 5 year index, so that we don't just have incremental changes, that we will have something so that the department doesn't spend a whole lot of money to change the deduction by $14 or something like that. But anyway, that's basically what the bill does. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, does this put us closer in line with some of our competitive states, economic development-wise, for this income tax rate?
Yeah, this will have a beneficial effect on economic development. I think in the state of Georgia, there was a lot of positive publicity when the state of North Carolina reduced their top rate from 7% to a little bit over, I think it's 5.499%. This will actually bring us below the state of North Carolina.
Representative Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman for bringing the bill. I just want to thank you in not just for the overall direction of this bill, but also the part about the keeping up with inflation. I appreciate you making that part of this bill. I think that's a great thing to do, and in the future, because to your point, in the event that we didn't do this, it would be like a small tax increase every year on the people of Georgia. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, sir. Is that Representative Battles, or is that you? Okay, Representative Williamson.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I join Representative Teasley and thank you for bringing this measure. Just sort of furthering your point about the ability to create a good marketing opportunity for the state of Georgia. Isn't it true that many young professionals, when they're choosing a place to locate and practice their chosen profession, many of them have enjoyed job choices between numerous states, that they tend to gravitate towards the low-tax states, in particular the income taxes?
I think that's certainly a factor, and I think it's an important factor.
Other questions? What is the pleasure of the committee? We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of passing House Bill 329 on to the Rules Committee will say aye. All those opposed? It moves on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. That was yours? All right, next, we're going to call House Bill 325. Chairman Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill we've worked on for a couple of years that clarifies the income approach to assessing properties, commercial especially, and around our state. And this just allows a mechanism for those income-producing properties, if they so choose, to use their income and expenses whenever there's challenge in the valuation of their property. Essentially, that's all it does, Mr. Chairman.
Are there questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion and second do pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. It passes on to rules. House Bill 337, Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring for your consideration today the House Bill 337, LC 5141S. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's 0601S. This bill is a Department of Revenue.
Whoa.
I'm sorry, did I hit the wrong number?
Yeah, it's 5085 ER.
I apologize. We have so many today, it's hard to pull up the right one. All right, 5085 ER. This is the Department of Revenue requested bill. We began work on this last year. It is truly it was a pleasure working on this measure, in that it was a collaborative effort by both the Department of Revenue and the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Authority to come up with an effective, efficient, less cost to the taxpayer methodology, which also increases transparency to any interested party when it comes to Department of Revenue state tax liens. The measure does not change the attachment or way the state can attach who's responsible to pay any past due tax bills, but what it does do is allows a statewide tax lien in any real and personal property that any interested party can find immediately through this transparent electronic mechanism, which again would be administered by the Georgia Superior Court Clerks Authority. One of the measures, one of the changes in it right now, the Department of Revenue can lien for 7 years at a time, at the end of which they can re-up that lien for another 7 years. This just constricts it down to one 10-year lien period time. The measure, again, overstating it, but it was very much a collaborative effort by our Superior Court Clerks Authority, which will administer the program. Both the mortgage industry, the banking industry, all the finance people that have an interest in perfection of liens and whether or not liens are on record or not, the Georgia Bar, everyone's in agreement that this is a good piece of legislation, so I would be happy to answer any questions. If not, I encourage you to pass this measure.
Are there questions? What is the will of the committee? What? Yes, sir. Which number?
Thank you, Representative Williamson, for bringing this, but has there been any opposition? Because it sounds like an excellent piece of legislation, but I haven't heard of any opposition
Once
to
we
this.
got, the answer to that question is no.
Great, thank you, very well done. Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We have an amendment. It is on your iPads. Basically, what it does is adds a number 6, that a tax sale conducted by any sheriff, tax commissioner, or municipal levying officer in the state, provided that proper service was effectuated on the department in accordance with OCGA 48-4-45, will not be included. It basically talks about the priority of liens, and this was one that was brought to our attention. We talked to the Department of Revenue. They did not have an objection to it, and so that is an amendment that I would propose. Is there a second? Second. All right, there's a motion and a second as to the amendment. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Now we go back to the LC number that we're operating off of, 345085ER as amended, and we will send a committee substitute to the rules if it's enacted. So as amended, what's the pleasure of the committee? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes on to rules. Chairman Stevens, talk to us about the Uniform Certificate of Title for Vessels Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been trying for years to get titling of boats. Problem with the banks, and getting a title, of course, just registration is about all you can get, and some of these things are rather expensive, to say the least. We found a mechanism that doesn't cost us a dime. The people that currently do the registrations within the Department of Natural Resources are going to do the titling at no cost. They're going to absorb that. So whenever a person buys a boat from a dealer, they'll finally be able to get a title and present to the bank for a loan. And again, everything stays within the Department of Natural Resources. The cost will be $10 only if they ask for an additional copy. So, Mr. Chairman, that's about as plain as I can get. We don't get very many bills that come through that don't have a fiscal impact, but this is one of those bills.
Are there questions? Representative Williamson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the author of the bill. I just want to clarify, when you were opening remarks, you said this historically been a problem for the banks. The problem was the banks didn't have clarity on who owned the vehicle. They didn't have a problem with the titling. In fact, that industry and anybody that's lending to a consumer to purchase a watercraft, this should increase the ability to do so, increase efficiency and lower prices as a result of this measure. So thank you for bringing this bill.
And Mr. Chairman, I didn't mention this does not cover casual sales, so that was a fear before. That's not in the bill. Thank you.
Other questions? What's the will of the committee? There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moves on to rules. Representative Raffensperger, tell us about HB 375.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That works. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill cleans up the section of the code in a few sections. On line 13, you'll see currently it says before on or after. It actually but on or after, and that's been stricken. It actually should have said before, so that's just a cleanup section. Everywhere else, when you look in the code, it's just really a few word changes, like on line 21, thus, this state. And then the other change would be on section 2, that it would repeal the fee for issuance of tax executions, which would be tax liens.
Are there questions? All right, there's a motion, a second to pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes on to rules.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Rutledge.
Hold on, let me get to it.
397. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 397 is pretty simple. All we're doing is adding language that folks having to move for medical reason into nursing homes or assisted living facilities will not lose their homestead exemptions.
Are there questions? This is basically a clarification. It's not a change in the law, but some folks think that a temporary absence does not include a nursing home stay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Representative Carson.
Representative Rutledge, you and I have spoken about this and how you were personally, or someone close to you was personally impacted by this. And I very much appreciate you bringing this and so forth. I did have a question in regard to a stay in a nursing home. Just as the chairman mentioned, we're talking about a temporary stay. Well, I'm supportive of the bill. I'm just wondering if you gave any thought to what a stay would be. Would it be 90 days or 1 year or 5 years or anything like that?
Well, in my opinion, it really doesn't matter what the length of stay is.
Right.
Because when something like this happens, you really don't know. And families are faced with, not knowing until it's, too late. In the case of my mother, it was, 4 years until she passed away. And so that's, we wouldn't have known to even do this.
90 days definitely wouldn't have worked.
No.
Because that was 4 years in a assisted living.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing the bill.
Thanks.
Representative Peake.
Representative Rutledge, just real quick, just for clarification, because what if an individual moved into an assisted living area, that, these kind of new communities that are
Medical reasons. Medical.
Okay, so it's got to be specifically related to a medical reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if they move to a village,
Right.
this would be precluded. Okay,
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, this is like, for instance, if someone has a stroke, they may go into the nursing home. They intend to go home. They may never go home, but they intend to go home. Some of them do, some of them don't. But you do not want the tax assessor to be able to go out there and say, you qualify, you don't. So if it's for medical reasons and your intention is to return and you don't permanently change your residence, then you still get the homestead. Are there any other questions? What's the will of the committee? Is there discussion? All in favor say aye. It moves to full to rules. All right, Chairman Dollar, you got here just in time to close out the show. Tell us about HB 196. Go to the middle one, please.
Thank the chairman and the committee for accommodating me. I actually just came from another committee meeting I was having to chair. I know y'all had to move me around a little bit. It's appreciated. Substitute to House Bill 196 is a result of study committee, joint study committee that occurred over the interim between House and Senate, looking into what we could do to raise the music profile in Georgia and create jobs and economic development. And it's a very simple measure. It's a one-page bill, and it simply, what it does is it creates a income tax exemption for royalties received by musicians and song composers. And the thought is that if we need to retain more of the Georgia talent in this industry and really have some resources, if you will, to attract and grow the industry here in Georgia. What we were finding is that a lot of people are from here, they want to live here, but they just can't afford to. And this is the small, the medium, and the large size acts and artists. The industry tends to grow organically, if you will, around the talent, and we really need to do more to retain our talent and to attract more. Places like Nashville and L.A. With that, I will be glad to take any questions.
Are there questions? Representative Teasley.
Chairman Dollar, thank you for your presentation, and I have some concerns here. As I think about, we've talked about in the committee oftentimes, the reason we offer tax breaks in some kind is either to spur economic growth or to provide tax relief to people in need. You just mentioned that there are people who want to live here but they can't afford to. Would you develop that thought for me a little bit?
Well, right out of the gate, they lose 6% of their income by living here instead of Nashville.
Mm-hmm. But that's true of any person who chooses to live in Georgia. That's true of me. That's true of you. What would make a celebrity like a musical artist more sympathetic and in need of a tax break than you or me or the citizens we represent?
I don't know that we're talking about pure celebrities here. We're talking about people at every stage in the industry. And if we want to grow the industry here in Georgia, we have to do something to compete with places like Nashville just to the north.
Okay. Would you further yield?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess one of my great concerns I see here is a number of people in the entertainment industry, obviously Hollywood, which we're not dealing with here today, but also in the music industry, are often well known for calling out the South and calling out Georgia as being backwards, as being that we have our values are backwards, and so my concern is we are inviting people to move to our state because of tax, because people do move because of tax policy. We know this. Mm-hmm. We're inviting people to move to our state who might otherwise call us backwards, and I have great concern about that.
Well, and I appreciate the question, but I think what you're going to find, and what we talked about, you know, people who want to live in a place like Georgia because of its values and its quality of life. You know, these are people with kids and families, and they don't want to live in New York, and you know, they don't want to live in LA. They want to live in a place like Georgia, and they want to come here because we are what we are, and we are who we are.
Right, but oftentimes what happens when people move from a state that they don't like the tax burden, then they come here and they try to change the state to match their values, and that's really, if I had to be honest, that's what I'm concerned about. You see people move into the state for tax reasons, and then wish to change Georgia to be more in line with their set of values, and that's really where I'm.
Well, I appreciate the concern, and you know, and I understand it, but we haven't seen that kind of tidal wave of change in Nashville as far as morals and values and things that you're referencing, I think.
Okay. One thing I'd like to consider, I'd like to ask if you'd be open to some kind of a sunset in this, whether it be 5 years or something to that effect, that we can get an idea of if that's what's happening.
I don't know that that's what we want to do. When you talk about sunsets, you're usually talking about tax credits and things like that. When we're talking about income tax matters, I don't think that that's generally a common practice. I'd be more than willing to revisit this if we see a problem. That's what we're here to do. We're here to act.
Okay, thank you.
We have a couple other questions. Representative Peak.
Thank you, Chairman Dollar. Is it not true that that, right, like Representative Teasley said, sometimes we provide tax credits to people who for economic development, and in effect, these entertainers or composers, or as you put in the bill, are in effect, as you said, economic engines which provide organically business and economic opportunity around them. And so therefore, there is significant economic growth potential from keeping these individuals in our state or inducing them to come and live in our state. Is that not correct?
You will see not just artists, but attorneys, a whole variety of people in the industry that you don't know about. But you're
Did you
exactly
say
right.
attorneys?
Yes.
Really?
Every one of these acts, Mr.
We don't
Chairman,
need more
has
Attorneys and groupies is the same thing.
But no, I appreciate the question, and you're exactly right. they are mini economic engines, and they do bring a lot of jobs with, you know, wherever they are, they bring jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Representative Blackman?
Appreciate what you've done here, Chairman Dollar. I appreciate your friendship. I know y'all have worked hard, and there's several bills out there that are kind of geared towards enhancing this industry and economic development here in the state of Georgia. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I just wanted to see if there was an answer to this, but I live in a county with a very high military population, and currently we don't exempt veterans or active duty military, to my knowledge, from income tax. And so I was trying to reconcile, since I'm pretty ignorant to this industry to a great degree, how I could justify this income tax exemption and not be giving one by the state to those individuals that have served the country.
Well, the speaker
In the manner that they have.
the speaker tasked me. He said, "I want you to raise the profile of music in Georgia, and I want to create jobs." And this, I feel, out of the several meetings that we had, and we had meetings, you know, in Athens, in Savannah, and in Atlanta, and we met with everybody in the industry. And I feel that this is the strongest answer that we have to how do we accomplish those goals. And when you talk to people in the industry who look at this, I had a conversation with somebody who said, you know, my brother-in-law is a tax attorney in New York who was moving to Nashville. I just offhand told him about this, and he goes, "That's a game changer. That's a game changer in Georgia."
Well, I greatly respect the work, and I respect what you've done here, and I appreciate it very much. I just want you to understand, you know, where I may be coming from there. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of the bill, Representative Dollar, help, and I believe I explained to you that yesterday was, or the last presentation when it passed out of committee, was the first time I'd heard your presentation on this bill, and I got to came up with questions after the fact. Walk me through what happens with the existing Georgia citizens that are receiving music royalties. Am I to understand that they would be exempt from existing royalties for income taxes beginning January the 1st, 2017?
Can you clarify the question a little bit?
Well, it says, like, for example, if you have any existing Georgia citizens,
Yes.
would they begin in January, on or after January the 1st, 2017, they wouldn't have to pay income tax on the royalties they're
On
getting
the
right
royalties you
now?
receive. So when it's in a TV commercial or a movie or something like that, the gentleman's exactly right.
And how does that help grow jobs? I just don't understand how you can tie job numbers back to
we
it.
had to pick a date, and what we're finding, Representative, is that they're leaving Georgia. And, I mean, we could have done upon signature, we could have done it, you know, that was just the date that we selected.
Do we have any estimate of job numbers? You might have given those numbers in your presentation.
We talked about that yesterday, and, you know, as with the film and movie credit, when we were doing that, it's just really hard to gauge how many jobs. We have a fiscal note, and that's the best indicator we have. Thank you, Bruce.
All right, Chairman Battles.
I asked this question, I asked several questions, but this question comes up. It seems as though the artists that have been very, very successful and would like to come to Georgia to take advantage of this income tax on their royalties that are paid to them, that we attract these type of artists that may be worth $200, $300 million, which is I don't understand how we're really helping the base of our population. If these people those people are the ones that we're attracting into the state. Then the only ones that we're really attracting are those that are in their type of business. And when I say that is maybe somebody running a sound studio or, I'm not real sure, you're more familiar with this. I've been thinking about this since the committee meeting, and it's troubled me in the fact that people who want to just say, hey, look, I'm paying out millions of dollars in income tax on royalties and of my music. I'll just move to Georgia and I won't have to pay that anymore. Can you just? It troubles me.
It's important to not consider just that one individual, but again, it is the economic, I guess, engine that surrounds that individual or that band or that particular artist or that songwriter, and this is how we compete, Chairman Battles. This is how we
Okay.
compete.
All right, thank you.
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dollar, I don't think any of us dreamed that this $7 billion movie industry was going to take off like it did whenever we were trying to anticipate the cost back then. But would you agree, and I want to go strictly to the songwriter portion, those guys are a magnet for the industry, that they themselves pull people, that the people who want their songs want to be close to them, and they become a magnet for the industry? Would you agree to that?
You're exactly right.
Would you agree that this is more of and of all the things that I've seen that would help the industry, this may be the least expensive and probably the most productive? Would you agree that this is more of a leveling the playing field with Tennessee?
It's exactly right.
No further questions.
We have, unlike film and TV and movies, where we did not have that infrastructure, we did not have those natural resources. Georgia has the natural resources. We just can't keep them, Chairman.
Representative Fry.
Mr. Chair, I got a couple questions for you. So, talking about the artists being magnets, isn't it true that that's kind of a trickle-down theory of economics, where the wealthiest individuals getting a tax break would also create more jobs on down the line?
This is going, just to say again, this will help grow jobs in this industry and help grow this industry.
And just to clarify, we're only talking about income derived from a specific source, which is licensing for composed music into our film industry, and not a whole taxable income break.
You can think more about it like you are incentivizing a song than as just a blanket income for an individual. So they will, any income, royalties that they receive from a copyrighted song is what we're talking about. Thank you.
And may I ask one more?
Sure.
Have you ever heard a Georgia artist in a song that's popular disparage the state?
I want to answer that honestly, and nothing comes to mind at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on this.
Representative Corbett. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I know Representative Carter's got a music bill. I want to just make sure, is hers totally different, or what's she working on, or y'all, is it going to be working together, or is?
They're dealing with they're both music bills, but they're dealing with entirely different subject matters. So I'm happy to address that with you if you want to talk about it, but I don't want to speak for Chairman Carter about her bill.
But it's on different issues with the music.
They are addressing this in entirely different matters. Yeah, totally different ways.
All right, I don't see any other questions. What is the will of the committee? All right, there's a motion and a second do pass. Is there discussion? Representative Teasley.
Would this be an appropriate time to offer an amendment?
It would.
I would like to, after line 17, we put in an amendment that this article shall stand repealed as of December 31st, 2022, unless reauthorized by the General Assembly, prior to that date.
I don't think you need the last part of that
Okay.
to have the
Fair enough.
effectiveness.
Fair enough.
I mean, the sunset can be amended to change it, or it can be removed by the General Assembly at any time. All right, there is a motion to amend. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second to amend. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, the amendment carries. Now we are on to the motion to do pass as amended. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? No. We'll divide the House. All in favor of the motion as amended, raise your hand. I want to see them now. All right, all opposed? Motion carries. That's the last item on the agenda. We are adjourned.